Welcome to the Bitter Medicine Podcast, where it's all about Black empowerment. Our show focuses on Black news and entertainment, arts, science, economics, history, people, and strategies that uplift, empower, and motivate Africans within the diaspora. And now, your host, whose favorite color is black, Goku.
Yes, welcome to the Bitter Medicine Podcast. This is your host, Cuckoo. I wanted to talk to you guys today real briefly about something I recently experienced. Actually, I experienced this thing in the past 2 days, and that is being called to jury selection. And I noticed something I'd heard about in the past, but I really experienced it, had a chance to observe it in this past 2 days. The jury selection system needs to be changed. As a matter of fact, today's show is going to be called "We Need to Replace the Jury System." And why is this? Why am I saying this? Well, I noticed something. When I went down to the court to report for jury duty, damn near half the people there are black. Damn near half the people in the court appearing with their jury summons was black. I think nationally the average is somewhere between 35 and 40% of people who appear with a jury summons at the courts. It's something like 35 to 40% are black. So why is it then that we get all of these instances of all white or damn near all white juries? Look, jury duty is important. Then again, maybe it's not. South Africa, ironically, outlawed the jury system and replaced it with a system that has two court-appointed law-knowledgeable persons who decide upon an individual's fate. Two folks, knowledgeable in law, professionals, decide on an individual's fate. Maybe that's something the U.S. needs to move to. Maybe that might have as much or more problems than the current system, but something has to happen. There are too much black folks appearing to serve, to do their civil or civic duty, and they're being turned away. In fact, black jurors are 2 times likely to be struck down than white ones. There are several reasons why this might be. The most obvious one, as you know, is probably because the prosecutors and those who are involved are racist. But the issue with that historically has been, how do you prove that these lawyers are biased against having blacks on the jury? You would have to be able to prove that's what's in this person's head or heart against the average black juror. And that is almost impossible. That's one of the problems we have now when these so-called police officers kill unarmed black folks in the streets. And back in the day, we used to go for the murder charge. Well, you have to prove that this motherfucker woke up that morning with the idea that he was going to kill this black person. You can't really prove it. So it is a thing in the court system where they have something called like the preemptive challenge or something like that, preemptory challenge, where they can strike down jurors at will without justification. And it was a court case some years ago called the Batson case, Batson versus Kentucky, where they added that it was illegal to strike based on race, that it was actually unconstitutional. But there's always a workaround to these things. Well, the workaround was to provide a BS race-neutral reason why you struck down these black jurors. Several reasons have been things like the person lived in a poor part of town, they failed to make eye contact, they displayed bad posture, they had long hair like dreadlocks, they had a beard, they seemed disrespectful, they were very talkative. So you could come up with all these neutral reasons why you didn't select black jurors. And it's even more difficult then to say that race had reason for why these jurors were struck down. You can't prove what's in this person's heart. So we need to change the system. Now, there's going to be a reluctance to change the system as it is in all things of white supremacy that affects black lives on a daily basis, this time in law. You see, white people know that it's usually all white jurors in the judicial system. They know this. They prefer it that way, and the prosecutors, etc., they prefer it that way as well. The reason why they prefer it that way is because when you have all white juries, they found that there's 0% of acquittals. When there's all white juries, especially when the defendant is black, there's 0 acquittals. But as you raise the number of black jurors, especially when there's a black defendant on trial, as you raise the number of black jurors, the percentage of acquittals go up. So you see, like in the case of O.J. Simpson, where that juror group was laden with black folks, there was a not guilty verdict returned, right? So white folks have realized that, as a matter of fact, when O.J. got off, there was a lasting impression by white folks. I could remember very clearly looking at TV and seeing white folks on TV very upset, very angry, and saying things like, oh, they got their boy off, meaning that the black folks on the jury got black O.J. off. And so what comes from this fact that you have 0 acquittals, prosecutors particularly like all white juries, because when it comes to the death penalty, it's like something like 70% of white people love the death penalty, barbarians. Only 30% of black people like the death penalty. So when there is an opportunity, when you think of all the black folks who their sentencing, the trial, everything was questionable. Okay? When you think of all those things where everything was questionable, and those guys were still let off and executed, most times that's by an all-white jury who sanctioned that because that's what they like. They like the death penalty. As a matter of fact, I saw today where Ava DuVernay, the director, the black woman director, she is bringing to Netflix a 5-part series on the Central Park group of guys who were accused of rape. And if you remember, Trump took out full-page ads talking about bring back the death penalty, bring back the police. And a lot of people liked Trump from then, by the way. This was in the 80s. A lot of people liked Trump back then. So it's no surprise that he is your commander-in-chief today. Not really. So it goes to show you white folks are very eager for the death penalty, especially when the defendant or defendants are black. So we need to address this issue. And this issue has been addressed, mind you, but nothing has happened to really affect a lot of change. You see, previously we were working off the idea that black people just didn't show up to serve in the jury. At least I had that idea myself. Because I, too, at one point was reluctant to appear to appear for my jury summons. I'll be honest with you. It's in recent years when I've been really taking a look at the injustice system that black folks in America are exposed to, and I realize, wait, I need to not turn those things down. I need to actually actively try to serve, which I did this time, and I was dismissed. Now, I had a problem with the case that I was being selected for, or potentially selected for, and I voiced it because I'll just put it like this: it was a slip and fall case where someone essentially didn't clean in front of their property after a snowstorm, and someone slipped on ice. And me personally, I'm going to stick for anyone who falls down in front of a property that wasn't properly maintained. And I expressed that, so they let me go. But particularly in these criminal trials, I used to think black people just didn't show up. Black people just didn't want to go. But I saw for myself, I observed, almost half, a high percentage of people who were there were black. So that means that folks are just being cut out of these processes and not allowed to appear. And the reasons are because of what I mentioned before: white people like the death penalty. White people, when it comes to black people who are defendants, they are going to say guilty. And the prosecutors love that, right? So as you know on this show, as you know from our Facebook page, I always push the idea of the think tank. I always want to have our people coming together, discussing how can we fix it. In the comment section of this video, I'm going to ask the question, what are some ways you think we can fix this? Most of it has to be fixed through legislation. That means that voting is important because you have to elect the officials who are going to run on this type of platform and then affect some change. We have to change the system because in the system of white supremacy, any one of us at any time can be up there being judged by a jury of people who are not our peers, really. So I want us to come together, and I want us to share some ideas beneath this video. Like I said, this was going to be a short video, but we have to address this issue. We have to get people who are familiar with law, who are law professionals, who are black. We've got to get people together discussing this and trying to come about with some idea of a change. How do we prevent these lawyers, these prosecutors from coming up with these BS reasons for why they struck down black folks who came to serve? We know the effects. I just discussed them. We've known the effects for years now, but we really have to make a change. I saw it these last 2 days, and I was dumbfounded by how many of us are there and not being selected. And how is it that we always have these majority, if not all, white jurors all the time? And as a matter of fact, I read one time ago that in the southern states, this is particularly true. So let's add all these things together. Southern state, history of slavery and racism, Jim Crow. And now all you white folks on these juries, for black folks, oftentimes in these cases where the death penalty is on the docket, not a good look. We have to make some kind of change. One of the quick changes we can do is stay our asses out of the judicial system. That's true, but things do happen. You could be falsely accused. What do we do next? So I would like to hear from you guys. Until next time, this is the Bitter Medicine Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Bitter Medicine Podcast with your host, Koku. If you like what you just heard, we hope you pass along our web address, bittermedicineblogs.com, to your friends and colleagues, and share our show to all your social media. Be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous podcasts. This has been a KWAZ radio production. Join us next time for another session of the Bitter Medicine Podcast. Follow us on Facebook at Bitter Medicine Show, Twitter, Bitter Meds, Tumblr, Bitter Meds, Instagram, Bitter Medicine.